이스라엘 선교 전문 방송 브레드 TV에서 매년 봄과 가을에 진행하고 있는 이스라엘 회복 순례가 2016년 가을에도 출발합니다.
지금은 엘리야 때처럼 주 말씀이 선포되고
사랑해요 이스라엘.
주의 종 모세의 때와 다시 언약이 성취되네. 전쟁과 기근과 비판
2016년 가을에도 역시 이스라엘을 처음 가는 분들을 위한 올리브 코스와 이스라엘의 색다른 장소, 색다른 경험을 원하는 분들을 위한 무화과 코스 두 차례 진행됩니다. 9월 12일부터 8박 9일간 진행되는 올리브 코스는 예수님이 태어나신 베들레헴, 예수님이 사역하셨던 갈릴리 호수, 또 예수님이 눈물로 기도하셨던 겟세마네 동산과 십자가를 지고 가셨던 고난의 길, 그리고 골고다 언덕 같은 기본적인 성지 코스는 물론이고 핍박과 고난 속에서도 신앙을 지키고 있는 메시아닉주 교회에 가서 그들의 손을 잡고 위로하며 예배를 드리고 또 영화 회복의 주인공들을 만나 그들이 얼마나 간절하게 예수님을 믿는지 간증을 직접 들으며 그들의 손을 잡고 함께 중보 기도를 하는 시간을 가지려고 합니다. 9월 19일부터 8박 9일간 진행되는 무화과 코스는 역시 기본적인 성지 코스를 방문하는 것뿐만 아니라 예루살렘 중심에 있는 기도타워를 방문해 예루살렘을 한눈에 내려다보며 정말 예루살렘의 평화를 위해서 기도하고 또 메시아닉주 교회에서 그들과 함께 예배를 드릴 것입니다. 좀 더 특별한 이스라엘을 체험하기 위해서 예루살렘의 재래시장을 방문하여 그들의 생활과 문화를 이해하는 시간도 가지려고 합니다. 네게브 사막의 베두인 텐트 아래에서 모닥불을 피워놓고 벌어지는 메시아닉주와 함께하는 찬양과 간증의 밤은 아마 여러분에게 평생 잊지 못할 진한 감동과 은혜의 시간을 선사하게 될 것입니다. 제가 만든 이스라엘 영화를 이스라엘 현지에서 관람하고 그 촬영 현장과 영화의 출연자들을 만나는 시간, 그리고 그 현장에서 들려주는 하나님의 놀라운 역사의 간증들을 들려드릴 것입니다. 저와 함께 떠나는 이스라엘 회복 순례는 기존의 성지 순례와는 그 차원이 다르죠. 이스라엘은 더 이상 관광이나 순례의 대상이 아닙니다. 우리의 기도와 관심이 필요한 대상이죠. 그런데도 과거의 유적지만 돌아다니며 사진만 찍다가 오는 성지 순례를 하시겠습니까? 아니면 현재 하나님께서 이스라엘을 통해서 어떻게 역사하고 계신지 그 현장을 직접 확인하는 시간을 갖고 이스라엘을 위해서 기도하는 시간을 가지시겠습니까? 여행은 어디를 가느냐도 중요하지만 누구와 함께 가느냐가 더 중요하죠. 여러분, 저와 함께 이스라엘 가시죠. 제가 여러분을 이스라엘로 안내하겠습니다.
This week on Jerusalem Dateline, terror strikes France again. And 1 year after the Iranian nuclear agreement, experts say Iran, not the West, is the big winner. Plus, a wake-up call for America to stand on its Judeo-Christian values if it wants to defeat terror. And it will blow your mind what these Gaza kids are learning. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl, filling in for Chris Mitchell. We're coming to you today from a popular Jerusalem park, but we have some sad news. More than 80 people are dead, including children, from a terrorist attack in Nice, France. The attack took place during celebrations for Bastille Day. Here's more on that story.
Revelers in Nice, France had just finished watching fireworks celebrating La Fête Nationale, French National Day. Thousands walked along a popular seaside promenade, then panic as a white box truck began plowing into people, mowing down and shooting at them for a mile and a half.
It was quite a harrowing scene, to be honest. I seen one guy actually running, sobbing, crying. We've seen people holding babies, screaming, shouting, mothers running for cover. It was horrendous.
At least 84 people were killed, including 2 Americans, Sean Copeland and his 11-year-old son Brody, of Lakeway, Texas. Kelly Rappin of Florida witnessed the attack.
We didn't at this point have any idea what we were running from. We just booked it. I grabbed my fiance and we started running. We're not locals, so we really didn't know where we were going.
And the promenade had been closed off. So I suppose the big question is, how did the truck get on the promenade in the first place?
Police opened fire and finally stopped the lone terrorist. They found guns and grenades inside the truck. So far, no terrorist group has claimed credit for the attack. Police identified the attacker as a 31-year-old French national of Tunisian descent. He was known to police as a common criminal, but was not on terrorist watch lists. The French Interior Minister said his nation is in a war with terrorists, and President Hollande promised to reinforce French actions in Iraq and Syria. We will continue to hit precisely those who attack us on our own soil, in their own area, he said. President Obama condemned the attack and said America's thoughts and prayers are with the families of the victims. He said, "We stand in solidarity and partnership with France, our oldest ally." French police are investigating to determine if the terrorist had accomplices or acted on his own. President Hollande has extended a state of emergency for another 3 months, and the Belgian Prime Minister has increased security in his country in advance of national celebrations next week. Brussels was hit by Islamic terror at its airport and metro last March. The Nice attack was the second for France in 8 months. 130 people were killed in a series of attacks in Paris last November. France is now in 3 days of mourning. Gary Lane, CBN News.
ISIS and other terror groups often grab the headlines with their hideous attacks like the one in France. But experts warn there's an even greater nemesis. Just a year ago, America and 5 world powers signed an agreement with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Supporters of the deal said it would prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. But critics, as Chris Mitchell reports, say it's still a bad deal.
Please have a seat.
U.S. President Barack Obama hailed the deal as a diplomatic breakthrough when it was signed.
After 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not.
Despite the praise by President Obama and others, 1 year later, some experts still warn that the flaws within the agreement could mean that instead of preventing the Persian nation from building a nuclear weapon, it could lead to a nuclear Iran with potentially catastrophic results.
Their major goal in this negotiation was to get maximum sanctions relief in exchange for absolute minimal nuclear concessions. And that's basically what they got with this deal.
Emily Landau, an Israeli nuclear expert, believes Iran won the negotiations. It can walk away from the deal at any time. And the agreement failed to address Iran's ballistic missile program.
Their biggest victory is not having their breakout capability destroyed, undermined, dismantled. Not only that, they gained legitimacy for their uranium enrichment.
Throughout the negotiations, the Obama administration presented a narrative that said if you don't support the deal, you're for war. They also presented Iranian President Rouhani as a moderate. Former CIA official Claire Lopez believes the administration wasn't honest with the American public.
We're looking at a real coordinated effort to deceive the American people about this deal while not even touching on the covert program, which of course is where the weapons development is really going on, literally underground in bunkers and tunnels under mountains.
Lopez cites the now infamous New York Times Magazine article. In it, National Security official Ben Rhodes said they used the media as an echo chamber to help push its argument to the public in the U.S. While the deal puts restraints on Iran for 10 or 15 years, Landau says they don't mind.
Looking at the long term, which is what Iran does, they've kept their breakout capability, even if they have to wait out 10 to 15 years till the sunset clause comes into effect, and all these restrictions that we're talking about, whether they uphold them, whether they violate, everything will be lifted, and then they will be much better positioned in any case to move towards a nuclear weapons capability. A country that can develop intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities that could, maybe within 10 years even, reach the United States, obviously we're talking about a different order of magnitude.
No comparison at all. The threat from the Iranian regime is existential, particularly as regards their nuclear weapons capability and the EMP component of that.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Israel reacted angrily to the opening of a European Union office in Tehran, saying it's a grave mistake because Iran hasn't changed. They are still the greatest sponsor of terrorism in the world. That Islamic terrorism is a threat not only to Israel, as we've seen, but also to the entire world. One Islamic expert says America's military might won't even be enough to defeat the terrorists unless it has the values and will to fight. And as Chris Mitchell tells us, that expert is offering some unique advice.
If America and Europe want victory over radical Islam, they need to embrace their Christian roots, according to Harold Rode, religious Jew and expert on Islam.
The Christian world is a very powerful world if it chooses to be. It has enormous abilities. I want you Christians to believe in your values.
Rode lived and studied in universities in the Islamic world for years. He advised the U.S. Defense Department on Islamic affairs for nearly 3 decades. He says the view of peace takes on totally different meanings between Muslims and the West.
Peace in the West is let bygones be bygones. Let's say you and I had terrible problems in the past. We sit down, you give a little, I give a little, we shake hands. We don't forget what happened, but we work together towards our new goal. We put the past behind us.
As for Islam,
revenge is the basis of everything. If you don't avenge something, you lose personal honor. You are shamed. So there's never peace. You do not let bygones be bygones.
And what the West calls terrorism, Muslims see as classic Islamic warfare.
Islamic warfare comes basically from the time of the Quran. They were tribes fighting tribes out in the desert. You raid the other side. You take its property, you take its women, you take its children. Your goal is to make the other side afraid. You raid and withdraw. Eventually, by making the other side afraid, they withdraw and you take their territory. That's what terrorism is.
But Roll told CBN News America can fight it and win.
America and Europe has unbelievable, awesome power, but we don't seem to have the stomach now to use it. Power without the will to use it is irrelevant.
If Washington would stand tough, he said, many Muslims would cheer.
You would be surprised the amount of Muslims would say, thank God. Would they say it publicly? Not in the beginning, because they'd be afraid that they'd be killed by fellow Muslims.
According to Rode, that's where America needs to return to its roots.
But I want Christians to believe in Jesus. I want them to observe Christian values. With that, America is safe. Europe is safe. Israel is safe. The world will be safe.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
10 years ago, Israel fought one of those terror groups, the Iranian-backed Hezbollah, in an all-out war known as the Second Lebanon War. Since then, Israel has gotten stronger, but so has Hezbollah. I spoke with Middle East expert Jonathan Spire about the situation.
There was a Hezbollah attack across the border to a patrol of reserve combat engineering forces of the IDF, and 10 soldiers were killed. The bodies of 2, Eldad Regev and Udi Goldwasser, were taken across the border. And on July 12, 2006, the Israeli cabinet took the decision to respond to that attack across the border in a very determined way, and effectively took the decision to hit Hezbollah very hard to try to rebuild Israel's deterrence. And as a result, a war of 33 days erupted.
Is Israel better prepared, do you think, now than they were in those days?
Yeah, I think Israel is better prepared, because I think the army underwent, something of a not want to say transformation, but a change of focus following the 2006 war, understanding that Hezbollah is an enemy of a different nature, that Hezbollah is the main ground threat to Israel today, and that requires an army, effective and able to respond to them. And so yes, certainly Israel's better prepared. We should also, however, note that Hezbollah is better prepared too. A much larger complement of rockets and missiles now. They've certainly been training as well. So if a third Lebanon war does come, both sides in a certain sense will be on a higher level than in 2006, and it's likely to be a much bigger affair, my sense is, than 2006 was, if it comes again.
Can you say a little bit about Hezbollah, how they've grown or how they're prepared now?
Well, the thing with Hezbollah is that, of course, they are now bogged down in a very different war, not a war that they ever wanted. That's the war to protect Bashar Assad's regime in Syria. And Hezbollah have now been engaged in that in a very, very major way for the last 5 years. They've now lost, we think, around 1,500 fighters inside Syria. On the other hand, they're also gaining a great deal of experience in areas of combat they didn't know about before, fighting in unfamiliar areas, fighting in urban settings, not stuff they'd done before. So, there's a sense in which they're learning as well. But the bottom line is, for as long as the Syrian war continues, it is extremely unlikely that Hezbollah will be able to afford itself the luxury, so to speak, of hitting at Israel and opening up a second front against an enemy, vastly more powerful than the Syrian rebels they're currently engaged in fighting against.
Up next, you won't believe what these Palestinian children are learning in Gaza. You might expect a kindergarten graduation to display artwork or put on a nice play, but as Chris Mitchell reports, one kindergarten in Gaza acted out a very different and dark scenario.
This is not your typical kindergarten graduation.
أما الآن مع الفقرة التي طالما انتظرتموها، فقرة التدريب العسكري تحت إشراف الأخ الفاضل بلال ماجد عاشور. كل التحية له على جهوده الجبارة.
You're watching the graduating class at the Islamic Al-Huda Kindergarten in Gaza. The research group Memory posted the video after finding it on the kindergarten's YouTube account and Facebook page. The video showed the children dressed up in Islamic Jihad fatigues, handed mock assault rifles, and beginning to go through military drills. The young commandos staged an attack on an Israeli tank. They planted mines and launched mortar shells. Then comes a simulated raid on an Israeli army base. First, they kill the sentry, then enter the base and emerge with a kidnapped Israeli soldier as their prisoner. Some of the action incorporates helmet cam footage. This reveals the type of training given to some young Palestinian children. Afterward, the Islamic Jihad leader in Gaza delivered a speech saying the children were sending a message of love. Then he blamed Israel. The goal is to train children to become future soldiers against Israel, the Zionist enemy. The teenage MC of the event left no doubt of their mission. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Up next, a new documentary fights the anti-Israel boycott with satire and humor. The growing worldwide movement against Israel claims that Israel practices apartheid like the former regime in South Africa. Known as BDS, it urges countries and businesses to boycott, divest, and sanction the Jewish state. A new documentary attacks that notion, and as Chris Mitchell reports, it does so with satire and humor.
Boycott Israel
The film is called Hating Israel and features Christian comedian Brad Stein and his search for the truth behind BDS.
And so my journey begins.
The documentary takes a humorous approach to puncture the stereotype of what the world says about Israel.
They say it's an apartheid state, the world's pariah, an occupier. Basically, the world's greatest boogeyman. Even better than North Korea, Iran, and Sudan combined, especially if you ask the United Nations.
What do you got? It is as if they enter the Twilight Zone.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man.
I hope that the format that we created with the humor does not in any way trivialize this very important subject, but makes it palatable enough that people that maybe don't think it even matters will give it a listen and actually think, you know what, this is wrong.
The new platform to deliver anti-Semitism today is through the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement.
Filmmaker Stan Moore and his wife Lori produced the movie.
We can't just take what the mainstream media tells us. We can't just listen to some of the leaders and academics who are trying to convince us that we should be boycotting Israel. We shouldn't be supporting the Zionist state.
Its cutting-edge nature aims to reach a new generation.
This is not your daddy's documentary, okay? This is aimed at a millennial, younger audience. We got to get to those younger people because really they're the ones that's going to make the difference. Preaching to the choir is one thing, and that will get us so far. But we can't get those young people to understand that hating Israel is not funny.
So your people, Palestinians, have been here how many?
We've been here from the time of Adam and Eve.
Especially as Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand up and not allow our brother Israel or the Jewish people to stand alone and fight this battle alone.
It's a funny movie about a serious topic.
You're the Shaw. I wondered what happened to you. Thank you so much. He ended up here. And I just believe that I'm at a time in my career where I can just make money and make people laugh, or I can leave a legacy. And I felt like this was important, that I was going to be willing to put myself in a position where what God has gifted me with as a communicator, to tell Israel's story, to remind Christians that this is your duty by God to defend this nation, these people.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, the Old Testament is full of stories about the ancient Philistines. Now a recent archaeological find could shed light on their origin. Archaeologists in Israel have uncovered an ancient Philistine cemetery, and bones from that cemetery could give modern science clues for the first time to the history and origin of an ancient people that was one time one of the key enemies of the Israelites of the Bible. Chris Mitchell brings us that story.
Archaeologists found the cemetery while digging in Ashkelon, one of 5 known ancient Philistine cities.
Now we have a major cemetery right next to one of these 5 cities of the Philistines. So we're sure we've nailed it. We're sure we have a cemetery of the Philistines.
After 30 years of digging in Ashkelon, archaeologists say discovering this cemetery was an astounding way to end the expedition. New findings from the cemetery and artifacts from the excavation are on display here at the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem.
The name Ashkelon actually comes from the root shekel, so S-K-L, which means to weigh. The shekel, the new Israeli shekel, is also from there. So the name Ashkelon automatically connects us to commerce.
For years, archaeologists and scholars search for clues to the origin of the Philistines.
We're one of the few sites that can tell the story of the Philistines from beginning to end. They arrive, we think, from the world of the Aegean. And then at the end, in the 7th century, we see a brief renaissance, and then we see their final fiery destruction.
Archaeology professor Daniel Master from Wheaton College says the cemetery contains thousands of remains, of which more than 200 have been recovered. Now, tests on the bone samples from the cemetery that date from the 11th to the 8th century BC could confirm what many long believed, that the Philistines were mariners or sea people and traders who migrated to ancient Israel from the west.
This is going to allow us to see the Philistines face to face and to tell their stories not through the texts of their enemies, as the story has been so often told, but now we'll be able to tell the story from the standpoint of the Philistines themselves.
Harvard University archaeology professor Lawrence Steger started the expedition in 1985. He pointed out that most biblical references to the Philistines pit them as bitter enemies of Israel.
Most of the portrayal you get in the Bible is a negative one because they want to compare an Israelite against a Philistine. They are the uncircumcised, we are the circumcised.
Philistine has the idea of uncultured or unsophisticated. But what we find is that the Philistines were plenty cultured and plenty sophisticated, and they were quite a cosmopolitan people, an international people.
Other scholars say uncircumcised likely referred to the fact they were idol worshippers. The Philistines lived in Ashkelon for about 600 years.
That's a long time when we think about it in terms of even the United States and how long we've been there. And then finally they were destroyed in 604 BC.
They were destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar shortly before the Judeans were carried off to Babylon, as described in the Bible. According to archaeologists, the Philistines never returned to Israel, and in fact they were never heard of again. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Rockefeller Museum, Jerusalem.
That's it for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Remember, the God that's watching over Israel and you and me neither slumbers nor sleeps. You can follow us during the week on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm Julie Stahl. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.